The following program is a SUTV student production. The views expressed are not necessarily those of Salisbury University, the University System of Maryland, its regents, administration, officers, employees, or representatives.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a 25-year-old Navy vet out of Cecil County. I'm going to school right now for education. One thing I learned about my time in the military was that I really had a passion for service, which is one of the reasons I'm also going to school for education, because I want to serve in the community. And that's also a big reason why I'm running for Congress right now, because I just want to serve better than the people who are serving not themselves, but the political parties and the special interests, and not serving the people in the district like they need to be.
You know, a bit off camera, we were talking about how everyone doesn't necessarily know what a libertarian is and what a libertarian stands for. What does that mean to you? What are some of the things that you hold true? What are some of the values that you have high in your list of priorities as a libertarian?
Right, well, just like everybody else growing up, you know, I thought when I went to register, I could be a Democrat or a Republican. Didn't really know much about any other third parties. And in my time in the Navy, I met a lot of people, was exposed to new ideas. And when I started doing the research about where I stand politically, I came across the Libertarian Party, which is a very common sense approach party. They recognize individual liberty in both socially and economically, which is sometimes forgotten by the Republican and the Democratic Party. And they're the middle ground party, I think, and they bridge the issues. We're a party who supports the Second Amendment, but we also support ending the drug war. We bring about change that again bridges that social and economic liberty that is lost in this country.
Do you not think it would have been more politically advantageous to run as a Republican just with libertarian values, or with the libertarian wing of the Republican Party? Yeah,
that's often a suggestion for libertarian candidates, and I think that that assumption lies on two faulty premises. One, that the Libertarian Party is somehow a faction of the Republican Party, or maybe even more right than the Republican Party, which is untrue, which is why we appeal to a lot of voters. Historically, we bring in both Democratic and Republican voters into the Libertarian Party. We're the third largest party in the state and the nation, and we're the fastest growing party in the state, which I think demonstrates how our ideas resonate with people across the political spectrum. And in a Republican district, yes, it may have been politically more expedient to run as a Republican, but I'm not a Republican, and neither are many libertarians across the state, so it would be dishonest to run as a Republican.
Tell me about what you see as some of the biggest issues that are affecting the state, this area, District 1, and the nation, which you would have a say in if elected to Congress.
One of the issues that I think that the 1st District understands more fully than probably anywhere else in the country is that a burdensome tax system and an anti-business climate can really drive industry away to states like Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and sometimes even Virginia. And that's what we're doing on a global level nationally. We have a tax structure that pushes industry out to other countries and takes with them jobs that people need. And I think the 1st District really understands that, and that's something a lot of people in the district are concerned about, and that's something I'll take to the halls of Congress when elected.
Tell me your path to victory. You know that it's not an easy one, especially for a young person and a libertarian. How do you see yourself getting enough votes to defeat, Republican and Democrats?
Yeah, very true. The third parties, we never get as much money as the Democrats or Republicans. And back in October when this all started, I was talking to Bob Johnson, the chair of the Libertarian Party here in Maryland. And one of the first things we talked about was, we in this district, a libertarian's never gotten over 5% of the vote. So it's very difficult to win. But after talking to Fred McDonald, who's a very well-known historian in the area and an authority on Maryland politics, after seeing the response of the people, how well they responded on my website, through Facebook, I think we've got a lot of traction going right now. And while money is a big part of the game for people like Andy Harris, who has over $500,000 for his political campaign, over a third of which, by the way, was given from special interest groups. While that's a big part of winning any political campaign, I think that we can overcome that by starting a movement in the 1st District and doing something that no one else in the nation has done before, which is electing a libertarian candidate to the U.S. Congress.
Let's talk about some of the things you mentioned earlier, like ending the war on drugs. How do you see yourself being able to accomplish some of those things in Congress, in a Congress that's kind of had the same makeup for decades? How do you think you can go in and make those changes?
Right, well, right away, sending a libertarian to Congress sends a message to Washington that we no longer are interested in party politics or political gridlock. We want people who are willing to work with people to bring their issues to the forefront and resolve solutions for them. In other words, I want to put the people over the party, which is often forgotten about in DC. And as far as ending the drug war and other ambitious things, what we're willing to do and what I'm willing to do is to take baby steps. I'm not going there to say, you don't want to end the drug war totally, then I don't want to work with you. I'm willing to work with people. I think one of the first things we should do is take marijuana off the Class 1 drug list. It's preventing people from receiving medical marijuana help, from people that are hurting, and it's really tying the hands of doctors all across the country. And so it's those little steps that I'm willing to do and to work with people to bring about change.
Tell me about some of the experiences that you've had, some of the things that you've accomplished that you think make you a better candidate than others for this district.
Right, well, a lot of the experiences that I get and a lot of my stances on issues are shaped by the people who I talk to in the district. And I've received some overwhelming response on a lot of issues, particularly foreign affairs. A lot of people feel less safe given the current direction in DC. And I think a lot of that has to do with who we've represented to Congress. Andy Harris is a guy who's voted to spend $17.2 billion on other nations' militaries. He's voted to send $500 million to the Syrian rebels, which is exacerbating the Syrian civil war, causing a refugee crisis, leading to instability in the region. I think Americans, based off the people I've talked to, they want a more non-interventionist foreign policy, which is something that the libertarians offer, which no other party really does.
Talk to me about how you think you'd be able to work with other members of the state's delegation that we have in Congress and other members of the Republican and Democratic parties coming in as a libertarian to get some of these things done. Right,
well, I think the biggest function that I would play in Congress is alleviating some of the federal restrictions on states and really returning power to those delegates. I'm a guy who thinks that 50 governors have a better chance of getting it right than one president. I think that 1,000 legislators across the country have a better chance of getting it right than a handful of congressmen in DC. So my big goal would be to push the power back to the people, because too often people are forgotten when they want to connect with their representative in Congress to get things done. Well, really, we need to shift that back down to local control so they have the power to affect change in their community.
We're here at Salisbury University, so I've got to ask a question about education. Mm-hmm. I think you see agreement on both sides of the aisle, and I guess even in the what you would call the middle of the aisle, right, that student loan debt has hit a point that's just unbelievable. Do you have any solutions to that, to this increasing amount of student loan debt and the increasing cost of college?
Right, well, I think one of the things driving high tuition costs and the encouragement of students to take out loans is the fact that student loans are non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. So what that means that if you were to declare bankruptcy, 10, 20 years down the road, you're still tied to those student loans. So the problem with that is that the government has guaranteed to the banks that no matter what they loan college students, that they'll get that back over the course of their life. So there's really no incentive on the banking institutions to regulate who they're going to give loans out to, and it really encourages reckless spending on both the financial institutions to encourage students to go out there, and it feeds into the higher tuition costs that institutions can now charge because of this guarantee.
This area, we're always hearing about jobs, things like manufacturing jobs leaving the area and looking for more of the technological jobs. Do you have any plans to bring jobs to Delmarva?
Yeah, I think Delmarva would benefit greatly through a lower business tax from the federal government and through the income tax. It would be my goal to work with the people to decide what chart or what path they want to chart as far as constructing a tax system that is beneficial to small business owners, to corporations. What I think is often forgotten is that everyone in America should have the same opportunity. And that's something that we don't get when we provide subsidies, guaranteed loans, corporate bailouts to these big industries, which Congressman Harris has voted to do on numerous occasions. And what we do when that happens is we discourage competition. And the only way that anyone, the most underprivileged person in America, is going to increase their standing is through open competition. So what we need to do is alleviate the barriers for those people to do that. And when I'm in Congress, that'll be one of the first things I work to do.
Another big industry here is the poultry industry, of course, and that's across the region as well, and they're often in conflict with environmental groups. Where do you sit on that pendulum of protecting the environment and looking out for the environment, but also looking out for the industry and protecting the rights of the farmers?
Absolutely. I think as far as the environment goes, we need to have common sense approaches that are going to curb harmful effects that industry has. And one of the ways we can do that is by being consistent with the policies both in state, local, and federal government. We've waged a war against certain industries like the coal industry, yet we subsidize carbon-intensive industries like the automobile industry, the airplane industry. And what we too often forget is that we need solutions in our communities that work for everyone, both business and the worker. And by creating too many burdens, it forces industries to close or move. And what we need to do is have technology-driven solutions provided by corporations that do not conflict with federal or state law and that lead to a healthier environment that we can all enjoy.
Finally, again, I just want to know how you plan to get out the vote, get the vote out for you to win come November.
Right, absolutely. They say the internet is the great equalizer in politics. So I've got a campaign website, beersforcongress.com, outlines my positions, gives people the opportunity to get in touch with me, which several people have done. I've had a great response, and I'm working with those people to really create a movement in the district to raise awareness, coming on shows like this, having people really examine what a libertarian is and what our platform is. And I think as more people see that, more people realize that's the middle ground that they identify with. It really bridges the gap between social and economic liberties. And really just raising awareness of that and speaking directly with the people and being open to working with the people. I'm not interested in carving out my political stance based off what my party is or what my party's voting with. So my big push would be to engage the people, because I think it's very important to remember that the politician's job to work with and talk with the people doesn't end on election day. That's when it begins. So having a town hall 2 months before a primary isn't productive. Or a couple weeks ago, Jim Ireton was on the show and said that he was ready to beat Andy Harris with his record like a 2x4. So I think that we can hold politicians accountable without divisive rhetoric that really alienates voters and encourages them to stay home instead of coming out to vote on election day.
Matt, anything you'd like to add?
One thing I would say is that almost every political campaign, they tell people that they need to wake up or that they need to get involved. But too often they forget that America is awake. That's why there's a 20% approval rating of Congress. And America wants to get involved, but we've been shut out by a political process that no longer wants to work with the people. They only want to work with their party. By voting for a libertarian, you're sending a loud and clear message to Washington that you no longer want to deal with the establishment, you no longer want to deal with political gridlock, and you no longer want to deal with party politics. And you want to bring an end to the corruption in Washington and bring about real change that's going to impact people in their everyday lives.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.